Just a little test here. I hope that everyone can hear me. I will be up on the screen in just a moment. Sorry about the noise in the background. That is something I can't fix at the moment. Got a laptop, and this laptop is not at all happy about doing anything live, so it just screams. I don't know how to fix it. Hopefully we'll be able to do that pretty soon. For the moment, I'm just going to turn this off and just get the last, I guess, links out to anyone who might want to watch, and I'll be back in about 3 minutes. So have a coffee. I'll learn how to do this a bit better. Thanks for your patience. And that is good. Let's see if we can get a face up on the screen. Just gotta find face camera. Not that you want to see this, but to everyone who's here, and as far as I can tell, if I look over at the YouTube page, there's one person here. I'm very happy to have you. Thank you very much for showing up. It might be a good idea if I don't actually, at the moment, start the main meat of this thing. I don't have a lot of time today, though, so I got to think about this. So maybe what I'll do over the next 5 minutes is just tell 2 jokes, and hopefully they will be somewhat interesting for any of you there, to make sure that my levels are not going crazy. If anyone there can tell me if the levels are going crazy, please do, because I can't really tell from where I am sitting. So I mean, if it seems like it's going all right. Got 2 people watching. Sweet. Now I can, okay, if you make a chat, that thing is not going to show up in my OBS. I'm using OBS now. The reason I want to do the OBS rather than the YouTube thing, and it's much more difficult, and the computer's all loud and all that, unfortunately, and I'm very sorry for that. The reason why I want to use OBS is because if I don't, I can't show you images, and all you do is see my face, and I don't think that's terribly exciting. Even my wife isn't terribly excited by that. But anyway, let's start with, while we're waiting, just a joke. My favorite joke. Favorite joke when I was 12. See if I can properly tell it. Okay, there was a Swede. No, there was an American. I'm awesome at this, eh? Okay, there was an American, there was a Swede, and there was a Polish. Now I was a kid, right? So Polish was the one you joked about. And there was a Polak, and they were in the Amazon jungle walking around, and they got captured by headhunters. Another man, it's just you just can't. I'm just breaking all the rules. They get captured by headhunters, and what do they do? Well, obviously they can't do nothing. They're all tied up, and they're taken in front of these stakes, and there's huge vat of oil or water right there. And what is it doing? It's just boiling. And these guys are looking at it. I was like, what's going on here? And the leader comes over and he sniffs them, and he's like, you can tell he's like drooling out the side of his mouth. And he's like, you know what? I want to tell you guys the truth here, because I don't want to, you know you're going to die. That's obvious. But I don't want to kill you in an inhumane way. So I want to make sure that you know what's going on. So he looks over at the American. He says, we're going to eat you. We are going to eat you. But just so you know, we're going to make sure that our tribe enjoys all of you. And we do a good job of using every part to our benefit. For instance, your bones we will make into tools. And your skin we will use to stretch the sides of our canoes. Your hair we'll use for ropes. And, the American, the Polak, and the Swede are looking at each other like, well, if I want to be funny, they'd be like, that's not so bad, right? But they were a little bit worried. And then the chief says, another thing, because I am civilized, I want to give you the option of dying in the way that you want to die. So choose your weapon. And he goes over to the American first, and he's like, how would you like to die? What weapon would you choose? And the American says, give me an M16. Now, this may not make sense to you because you're like, why didn't he just mow down the tribe? So, but that's not part of the joke. So he's given the M16 by the tribal leader. And what does he do? He points at his head and he says, God bless America. And he dies. And that's the American. Then the leader goes over, he's a little bit sad. He's losing the hair. Can't use the hair of the American. Goes over to the Swede and he's like, you, my friend, how would you like to die? And the Swede, let's just say he's like, give me a knife. And the tribe leader gives him a knife, and the Swede says something like, for the 3 crowns, and right into his heart. Falls over. Clean, by the way. Didn't wreck any bones, just a little bit of skin. And the tribal leader watches him go down, and he goes over to the Polak. And he says, you, sir, how would you like to die? And the Polak says, give me a fork. And the tribal leader's like, all right. Passes over the fork. Tribal leader's waiting for it to say, for Poland or something like that, solidarity. And grabs a fork and he just starts stabbing all over his body as any soft bit, and he's gushing. This is a family show, by the way. He's gushing blood all over the place. And the only thing out of his mouth as he falls is, screw your canoe, screw your canoe, screw your canoe. That's the joke one of the jokes. Maybe we lost 2 people. Maybe we'll just leave it there for the moment. But that was my joke. That was my joke for... it was a good joke. All right. But we've done that for a couple of minutes. So we're on. What we're going to do now is get to the meat of the matter, which hopefully it's all right. Hopefully it's all right. Now, a lot of you guys know, or perhaps think of me, if you know me at all. By the way, my name's Nathan. I've been in I'm not an ambassador of Fujifilm. They probably don't like me because I'm a critic. I'm a very vocal critic, a loud critic, and one that isn't. I'm not an idiotic critic who's like, it's got to be this way because this company does it that way. I think very carefully about the things that I criticize, and probably because of that, my arguments make sense. And I've been told that by a number of people. However, as we know, in any fanboy world, it's not possible to be accepted, especially as a critic, of the people at large. And so in general, I've written some articles over at Fuji Rumors under the name either Omimage or Shigzeo. You'll see me posting there. A lot of people are upset at me. Some people are okay with what I say. But I think, and this is why I call this stream GFX100 white pills. I actually want to be GFX and /X white pills. And that is because I think that Fujifilm are starting to listen to people who are critical users of their stuff, but people who are actually critical of the machines that they output, that they produce. Why do I say this? Well, I could say that the first indication of this was the X-H1. And what is it that X-H1 did differently? Of course, the X-H1, I believe, came out after the GFX50S, which is the camera I have, by the way, just so you know. Scooching over here. All right, that's it. Wait, that's XT3. Ha! Gotta prove to you guys that I got more than one here. I'm not a hater. Not a hater. Rickety old chair. This is a Sorry about that. This is a GFX. Big camera, eh? GFX, it's got a Steele's ring. By the way, Steele's ring adapter is the real deal. What the Fringer adapter cannot focus with the XT3, the Steele's ring will focus with the GFX. Of course, slower, but it will actually focus. And this lens does not work. This is the spherical DGHSM Sigma from the previous generation, not the Art. It focuses on this bad boy. But anyway, one of the things that all of us should know as Fujifilm users, either GFX or X-H1, is that there was a big departure in some aspects of design that went into the X-H1 and the GFX50S. Namely, well, there's a couple of ones that are kind of under the hood. Namely, there's actually a battery in here that's big enough to take, let's say, this didn't go for the X-H1, of course. That got the whole horrible chintzy battery that I think needs to die a quick death, and that hasn't. They've been using for almost was it 8 years now? And when I'm doing magazine photography, which I just finished, I'm getting in between 80. Depends on how much chimping I'm doing, and you have to do chimping when you're doing stuff for clients. In between, actually, the worst I've ever gotten was around 40 images on a single charge, and the best I've gotten on the X-H1 and the XT3 was about 120 images on a single charge. That's bad. That is bad news. Well, the GFX, under the same circumstances, bigger sensor, all that, uses more power. I get between 300 and 400 images. It is awesome. Now, I wish that they brought that to the the X-H1. I think they'll bring it to the X-H2. Obviously, they're gonna. Okay, yes. Obviously, they're gonna bring like the XT. I'm getting a little bit of a gummy sound. Let's turn this down a bit. The XT4, of course, has a new battery that you get not double the battery life, but you get more competitive battery life with, which is great, absolutely great. It's absolutely necessary. It's amazing that Fujifilm's battery life has been so poor for so long, especially after you get things like the Sony Z battery does really good, and then the Canon EOS R is way better battery life, 2 hours of 4K video basically, and this thing 30 minutes, and of course stills are much better. But yeah, anyway, the GFX brought us, of course, a different battery. It would never work on the same chintzy battery, but it remains the battery that you can put in 4 different ways. It only closes one way, but the battery cannot be installed blind because there's not really any sort of physical indication of what goes where. But the XT4, it has 2 humps on the top, and it appears to have some sort of hardware stop so that you can't even put it in backwards. This is a huge improvement. Of course, that's from the newest cameras. But it's on the battery. It's on the sort of battery topic. I'm super excited by that. That's great. The next thing, of course, we know is the top screen. I know a lot of you guys are like, but the top screen gets in the way. I don't have the exposure compensation dial anymore. It's a real bugger because I wish I had that. It's direct. You know, a lot of people are into the whole Fujifilm world because they like the directness of the cameras. I understand that to a certain degree. However, this thing shows you everything that you need to know without looking at the EVF or the LCD on the back. Shows you your white balance, shows your actual shutter speed, and none of these cameras, I know all you guys are like, you set it to your shutter speed and it just works. It just works, man. You just look at it. You set up your camera so that it says 1000 here. It says 1000 right there, and then that's exactly the shutter speed that it's on. Yeah, no problem. Except that, of course, as you know, it says 1000 there, right? But if you have it defaulted so that you can still adjust, or what do they call it, buffer the shutter speed or whatever. Oh, I've got it turned off because I hate that thing. I hate that thing. Maybe the XT3. I don't know how to get that back, to be honest. Let's see. So the XT3 is set to 500, and on the back, I've just adjusted it. So it's actually 800. It can actually ruin photographs if you have, for instance, you think you're on the max shutter speed, sync speed for flash, 1/250. Well, look at it. It's actually shutter speed of 400. So you're going to get a black bar on the bottom. It's these sort of things are not, you have to look through. One of the big points a lot of people are raw about with the Fujifilm stuff and mirrorless in general is what you see is what you get. And with the Fujifilm, of course, you have the shutter speed dial direct, and so you just set it. You can turn off your camera and you can know what it's set to. Well, I've turned off my camera. It looks like it's at 1/1250. Turn it on and it's actually 400. How do you know that? You have to look at the back or the LCD. So what's different from a DSLR? If you don't disable that, that's your problem. But with the top screen, you don't have to look through either. Yes, when you have it off, it doesn't show that, but it shows all the details, white balance, that, remaining cards. It's great, totally great. And I'm really excited that they've done that on the GFX50 and the 100. Now the 100 goes so many more steps ahead. It does away, now a lot of you guys are probably gonna be upset at this, why do they do away with the labeled shutter speed dial? Well, I think it's quite honestly because they want that camera to be used in a more streamlined way by professionals, and that means nothing getting in the way. So if your shutter speed dial says 1000, you don't want to have to buffer it up or down, right? Now what I'm going to do just in a moment is just go look and see if there's anyone complaining in the chat that nope, no one is complaining in the chat. There's barely anyone here, but thank you very much for you guys who are here. Anyway, when you're doing things professionally, the best thing to do in any design, if you design not a toothbrush, if you design a chisel, the chisel, it's most important. It has a bunch of different important design elements to it. Or a hammer. People always say hammer's a hammer. It's not true. You want the hammer, when you hit it, to not reverberate too much in the handle. You want it also to be, if it's going to be a hooked hammer to take out nails, you want the hook to be the perfect angle for ripping them out. Or if you want it to be a destruction hammer, there's a million permutations of that. A million. And with any professional device, that's just how it is. And you want to have the device for the job. Yeah, you can absolutely do perfectly professional jobs with your GFX 50, the other one, R, which I don't think has the top one, or your XT3. I mean, I've done professional stuff with this as well. It's just that when you want to be able to rely on the interface to not fool you in any way, it's nice to have these extra bits of redundancy. And that's what it ends up being on this camera. On the GFX, of course, instead of having this labeled dial that can defer to the subdial, you have an unlabeled dial that endlessly rotates, and you can select from that single dial every shutter speed that you want. Just like on this camera, you would have to set it to T mode and then use the unlabeled dial, which basically turns it back into, in its own way, not the DSLR, but the non-Fuji cameras that we don't like because they're unlabeled or whatever. They're not direct. But that's awesome. I don't like what they did at the top where it looks like two little dials. They should just put the numbers. It's much better that way. More direct, more simple, not confusing. However, it's so nice that they have. This is an actual design problem. If you want to have the camera that looks like a film camera as much as possible, and you just want to use that, and you're just super excited about sort of feeling like you're using a camera from the days of yore, that's great. That's absolutely great. But if you want to have a camera that's more reliable because it doesn't do things you don't want it to do, it looks like you've set it to 1/250x and it's at 400, where you don't have to turn off functionality in order to get it to work perfectly, this is great news. And I expect that that's going to come to the X-H2. Now that brings me to our first scene. I'm going to click over here. I'm going to click scene. And this is an article I wrote 2019, about a year ago, April. And it's about I hope that this is all showing up roughly. So I'm just going to scoot over, I think, to the website and kind of scroll down here. This is X-H2 improvements over the X-H1, or 10 things Fujifilm should change for the X-H2. And I stand behind each and every one of these. I know that not a lot of people, no, I was approached by, and I still haven't done it, approached by an online magazine. They want to republish this. And that was over a year ago, and I haven't done it. I need to do that. They were very kind. They approached me in a very polite manner, and I haven't answered them. I need to get it to them, but I stand behind every one of these. And I wish I had my X-H1 still, but the GFX will stand in pretty well for it, because a lot of the problems that plagued the X-H1 in terms of design misses, or what I consider design misses, also plague the GFX 50S. And that mainly, the first one is the better formed or larger grip. Now this one isn't a tiny grip. It is not a tiny grip by any measure. However, it sticks out well, and you can wrap your fingers around it, which is nice, and it will balance if it's heavy from a single finger, which is great. That's the basics. If you have a lens on, it should be able to balance like that. If you can do that, you're 50% of the way or 60% of the way to having a great design. But you have to go a little bit farther or further. And what I mean by that is this grip, of course, is thicker than X-H1 grip. And the big problem I have with X-H1 is, despite it sticking out and you being able to balance the camera like that, it's also the narrowest grip on the market. I think this one, GFX, is just a little bit fatter than my index finger. And it's a little bit thinner than my thumb. Whereas, do I have my Canon? Let's see, I've got a Canon over here. Yes, I have a Canon, just a moment. Rickety old chair. The Canon one is thicker than my thumb. And what that means is when I wrap the hand around it, there are no gaps between even my baby finger, or I should say my baby finger. At the very minimum, there should be no gaps around the baby finger. And because your hand doesn't go directly across, but it sits back like this, all the fingers wrap around with barely any space. It is rock solid in the hand. Whereas with the X-H1, pardon me, and the GFX, if you look, there's gaps here, and that is all the way through. I can actually almost put my finger through there. It's not bad, but you can see my hand through there. There's a lot of extra space, so I end up shifting my grip. I have to reach around. If I really wanted to get like perfect like hand palm, like there's all that grip, there's all that like space there, and there isn't that space on the Canon. The Nikon is also very good, like a Nikon D200. SL is also very good. That's one thing I wish they would kind of fix. And I'm not so certain how they're going to do that with the X-H2. However, I have a lot of faith at this moment. I have a lot of faith, because, and I think we're going to get better, larger battery. We talked about that. That's the next one down. Let's see what else. Number 3, properly sized and shaped directional pad and joystick. This is one thing that really frustrates me. Not so much with the GFX, although I think they should have they could do better. The original X Pro 1 had a really nice pad. It stuck out. It was like concave or convex, stuck out like that. And the buttons, the middle one rose up the most, and the ones around it kind of went out to that point, like a dome. And so even if you had gloves on, you could hit every portion of any of those pads very easily. But then they started to go the opposite way, concave or whatever it is, convex. And so it's now kind of countersunk. And the only thing that sticks up is the lip on the outside, which means that you have no purchase for anything. The GFX is a lot, let's see, put them back to back. The GFX is much larger. And that means that you have more space for your thumb to travel. Is it good to have travel? I think so. Why? Because now I don't have big hands. They're long, but they're narrow fingers, and they're very metrosexual, which I was talking about. My thumb covers up this pad completely. You can't see it at all, which means that it's very possible to hit more than one button at one time, which means that I either need a nail or I need to use the side of my finger to just kind of nudge the thing and then move in to the center one. It's very, very simple to mess it up, and I always do this. With the GFX, because it's larger, it's just, I don't know, about the same size as my thumb. You guys tell me if we're getting any feedback or anything. It's still kind of a bugger. Pardon me, I'm just gonna move this a bit. It's still a bugger because they're not raised in the same way that the X Pro 1, sorry. But because it's larger, there's more space between the menu button and the OK button and the outer buttons, which means that I don't have to use the edge of my finger to interact with. I can just kind of nudge up or down like this. Now again, if you have super tiny thumbs, it probably isn't a problem for you, but the vast majority of people wearing gloves will have a very hard time. And I know they're like, why are you always talking about gloves? Well, you know, some people actually live in cold environments. I don't at the moment, but when I first started using Fujifilm, was doing a lot of hiking. The first time I used my X Pro 1 properly was actually in the snow. Actually dropped it in the snow about 20-30 centimeters down, no problem. But I found at least those buttons were workable in the snow with gloves on. Or if you're raining and things are slippery, it's nice to have more purchase. It's just nice to have a bigger, better designed button. And if the GFX buttons came to something like this, and there's room, they could do it, it would be great. The next thing that I wish would be fixed, actually, okay, I talked about the integrated shutter speed dial, which they've done the GFX100, which is awesome. Next thing I wish they would fix, and they did, and this is again the white pill, is the cards here. There's space for it, and there's always been space for it, and there was space in the GFX. These are cascaded. So if you got, let's see if I can get two cards here. Yep, one card here on the outer part. Pop that in. Next card, your backup card or your overflow card. Now, you want to take out the second one, and you're holding it like this. You have to be very careful with it. You have to use your nail, or you have to use the side of your finger, and it's very easy to accidentally do both. And if they're both out, how do you take which one? I want to take out that one. Now I know you're going to be like, "This first world problems, man." Well, in a way, yeah. But if we're talking about cameras anyway, which are expensive, it's all first world problems. And the second thing is that if you can make it easier to use and you have the ability to it, and other companies have already done it, and you know there's a better way to implement it, why not do it? They did it with the X-T4. So it's finally in parallel like the Leica SLs, which means you just pop here, and there's no need to go in between and kind of wedge out the two cards. I'm surprised they didn't do it like that actually with the GFX, because they have plenty of room. It's a much larger camera. Yeah. Hey, just a moment. I might have to just check downstairs for a second. So I'm going to turn off the microphone, and I'm going to set up to have a break. Guys, I want you to just have a break for a second. Face camera, turn that off. I'll be back in about 2 minutes, okay? All right, we are back. Let's try to bring this back up. Sorry about that, guys. Thank you very much for your patience. But anyway, the parallel aligned cards, which really need to be there, especially in a more professional body like the XT, well, 1, 2, or 3. I can't remember the XT1 had dual cards, actually. I had that in 2014. Was a camera I never really got into, mainly because, and this is one big thing I really dislike in the Fujifilm community, is that I think there's kind of an underdog syndrome where a lot of us, we want our cameras to compete with the big boys as much as possible, or to be better. And so when a new camera comes out, it's praised completely. There's very little criticism about it. And so what happens was, I think people were comparing the XT1's autofocus basically as good as the same generation DSLRs, or just one generation previous. And it was not even close. Not even close. And a lot of people today are finally all honest about it. They're like, yeah, I can still use it, you know, as long as things aren't moving. And it's like, yeah, but back then you were talking about it being almost as good as a mid-range like DSLR, like what would it be, 300 or whatever it was at that time. And they're not on the same level. And then that same thing happened with the XT2 and the XT3 when it came out. Some people were comparing it up to the A9. It's not even close. Then, of course, more honest people were saying it's on level with the A7, and it's not quite there either. It's not quite to the level of a D500 either. I think Fujifilm are a little bit behind on that, you know, the autofocus thing. And a lot of people are not honest with it about that. And so that's kind of a big thing for me with the Fujifilm communities. People are not so honest, but it could be that if the system keeps going on and more people come into it, that we'll get more, how do I say, more honest voices coming in who aren't just there rah the brand because they want it. Pardon me, I'm just gonna check over here. They want it to just do as good as possible, right? No, I mean they want it. I don't know. Like I said in the previous stream, tribalism I have no problem with, but if you're going to be all tribal, at least have a good narrative behind you. And I think that at the moment there's not a lot of good narrative to things that can very easily empirically be tested, but which a lot of times aren't. Like people are like, well, why are you using that camera for that anyway? Well, anyway, autofocus is getting very good. The XT3, I used it today for very simple stuff. However, it was tracking my daughter through a sprinkler system pretty well, not perfectly, but it nailed probably 70%. 60 to 70% of those photographs, which had to go through a stream of water, which is pretty good. Wasn't as good as the Canon, but that's not bad at all. And I think they're doing a lot better. And if they do the firmware update that I think a lot of us are hoping for with the XT3, it'd be very nice for us to get stuff, well, to get XT4 level autofocus. Extruded subdials, my friends, the XT3 has barely any purchase on these subdials. Like, again, if you wear gloves, you can have a hard time. Now, some of you guys are like, I have no problem, man. I use gloves all the time. I'm like doing snowshoeing, doing skiing and all that, and you got no problems. Yeah, well, you probably have absolutely like directed for photography gloves, or you take off the tops and whatever. These are slippery. I don't know what they are. They're like the worst. They're slippery. A better one, it would be some sort of rubber, or it has to be plastic or metal. This isn't metal, but it has to be metal like the Leica SL1. Make each of these, not rivets, but what are these? These vertical, whatever they are. Space them out more and bring the button farther out, which they did for the XT4. The button, I think the rivets or these vertical strata or whatever they are, I think they're basically the same, but the dial is brought out of the body more, so you have more purchase on it. This is happening right before our eyes. The company's obviously listening to people who are more critical, I think, or they've just gotten better at design. Whatever it is, it's good news, really good news. Drive-in meter buttons, that's the next thing. We do see on XT4 that they changed movie and stills mode, which is great. This one here, these two dials for the metering here and then the drive ones are real buggers, I think. The not only are they kind of made a little more sloppily than the Sony ones, and yeah, I know, Sony. Well, they are very easy to accidentally press. The other day I was doing, it wasn't a paid shoot, so that was all right. But I was just at the beach with my daughter and my wife, and I couldn't figure out why suddenly everything was black and white. And it turns out that it was, again, the same thing. I don't know. I don't know what I did, but I accidentally slipped it over to advance, I guess. But that happens all the time. And my fingers are not that big. My wife's female slim fingers, she has the same problem. She'll turn it on, suddenly it's doing you know, CLH or CL whatever, or it's doing something else and she doesn't want it to. These things need to be lockable, or there needs to be some way not to accidentally switch them. It's nice that you have at the touch of a button the change there, but it's too easily implemented, too easily changed, too easily set into motion, and it would be really nice if that could be totally changed. Let's see what. Whoa, that's still getting quite a bit of sibilance there. All right. Anything else? Rear-mounted autofocus switch. All right. Here's a problem. And this is something Fujifilm need to work on, and I'm pretty sure they know this. And why do I know this? Because they've changed the AFL button to here. All they did was change in the X-T4. They just changed the position of it. However, this is the worst spot for an AF on button. Absolutely. Yes, you can change what it is, but why should you have to change it? If the button is perfectly designed in the first place, it should be in the right spot from the beginning. If you want to add an extra one, fine. But there should be a button here that does what you expect it to do and just does it perfectly. The other thing is the button here, it's just a simple on-off button, like just a radio button like you on a computer, pop up, pop up, pop up. There's no travel to it. You can't hold it in and get ready like you can on like a Canon or a Nikon or a Panasonic. Man, those Panasonic ones are great. And they've done the same thing with the GFX. This is something they have to fix, I hope, for the X-H1, which of course should hopefully be their sports-oriented camera, which I really am interested in. We'll fix that if I stay the course. But that's something, because they're doing so many positive changes otherwise, I'm pretty sure that we may see. So, yaha, you know, for larger 4-way pad, got that. And then number 10, reform the AF on button. Yeah, did that already. I think I might have actually, oh, I got this out of order. Rear-mounted autofocus switch. So I actually meant this thing. This thing, you know, if you get used to it, that's M. In the middle is C. And then there's S, right? It's tiny. And this is my problem with it. It's tiny. Oh, pardon me just a moment. Looks like a family just came back. Give me a moment. Just give me a moment. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay, sorry about that, guys. If you're still there, if you are there, it would be great. Let's just see. Go over this page. Oh, there's 4 people. Guys, thank you very much for being as patient as you are. Where was I? 4-way pad, reform the AF on button, talked about rear mounted autofocus switch. So yeah, we do have, as you know, a rear mounted autofocus switch over here, but it's the same sort of sliding one, and sliding ones aren't necessarily bad, but if you can have one that integrates itself like the Panasonic does into the AF function over here, it means all of your AF functions are in one place and you can see it in front of you. And if it's larger, like again the Panasonic's one, it's just in the perfect spot. You don't have to change your grip. With this one you're shooting like this and then you're like, okay, just let me. And then if you got gloves on again, gonna be very hard to move it. I don't think that's something that Fujifilm will fix. I think they're happy with how they have it, and I think a lot of people in our community are happy with that. I wish that wasn't the case. However, knowing how many things changed for the X-T3 and then the GFX100, I would say about 40% of the things that I wanted to see fixed have been improved drastically within, so that's just one generation of cameras. And so I think Fujifilm are on the right road, again listening to critics rather than just fanboys, and that's awesome. And in the by the way, my family are calling me down to dinner, but right before I go, what I want to do is explain one thing. I got the GFX to replace 2 Hasselblad backs that I pardon me just a moment. Sorry, I got the GFX to replace 2 Hasselblad backs that I used on a Leinhof M679CS, which is a big bellows camera. Awesome bellows camera, extremely accurate, but it weighed something like, how many kilograms? 5 or 6 kilograms, and it had an included tilt on the base, so it could do 45 degrees straight from a tripod, which was great. But even my pretty heavy duty, see where I don't know if you guys can see it right here, heavy duty camera stand wasn't perfectly stable with it. It was just too much weight, and so I changed down, and I started using it with Novaflex Ball Pro TS and Exact 2, which are smaller cameras. The Novaflex is, I think, below 1 kilogram. Great camera. We'll be covering that later on. But what I found was, as good as the image quality from the Hasselblad was, when I used it on either a Fujifilm GFX100, which is an SLR camera that you can put VAX on and stuff like that, or through the Leinhof or through the Novaflex, it was hard as heck to focus. The CFV50, it had no live view, if I remember correctly. There was no live view. So I had to use sliding glass, and sliding glass is accurate if you have a high-end one, but not perfect. And the CFV60 or CFV50C, which is the one that uses the same sensor as the GFX, that one you could do live view. However, if you're tethering into your computer, in order to do live view for focusing, because it would always just default to, like, if you want to take it on ISO 100, shutter speed 1/125 or whatever, like 1/500, the maximum of your lens, then it would just show a black screen. So then if you go into focus, you have to set the ISO to 3200 or 6400, then change the shutter speed down lower so you get a bright environment. You couldn't do it at the touch of a button. And it just took, and I did a video showing how long it took to do with the GFX versus a Leinhof, and it was a best case scenario, and it was like twice as fast as the GFX. Well, in real life, in usual, it's much faster than that. So I loved the Hasselblad backs, but doing the focusing and all that was just a real bugger. And the GFX just super sped my jobs. I could do what took me 3 hours in about an hour, as long as I had the studio set up properly. And that, of course, a lot of what I do is stacking, and there's a lot of movement of reflectors and lights and stuff like that. But the GFX thing made things a lot easier. The one issue I have with it versus like a Hasselblad or a DSLR, like, or using the Hasselblad on the as a back to a DSLR like the GX680, is that when you go in for macro, it slows down incredibly. Even if you have it wide open, you have a fast lens like a f4 or an f2.8. Do I have any of those lenses with me here? I don't. Wait, just a moment. I might have one. This is not a good example. This is not a good example. It's at 3.5. Let's get the 2.8. This is not a good example. These aren't the proper enlarger lenses I usually use. These are just little Canon macro lenses. But this is an f2.8, and once you get beyond what is it, 1:1, you multiply. I don't know how it works. I just do my work. I don't know the maths behind it. But that f2.8 is effective like f11 or f15 or whatever. And when you get to effective f15 or f11, the GFX is impossible to focus. Absolutely impossible to focus. It's the frame rate update in the LCD is like, I don't know, 1 or 2 frames per second, possibly maybe 3 at best. And so you can't tell whilst you're focusing on the I don't have my Rails camera here, but on the Rails camera you can't tell if you're in focus or not. You take a photograph and then you look, oh, and so it ends up being exactly like using in some ways like using the back on a DSLR, except that it was slower to focus and harder to see. And you can use a whole bunch of external light and just like slam the thing with a whole bunch of heat and all that, and you can do that and it works, but it's just like, it shouldn't have to. I used the Leica SL and it would only slow down with an effective like f30 or f40. It was just smooth, very easy to focus, a lot better for macro. And the X-T3 is a lot better as well. And so the GFX100, I assume, I haven't used it, is probably and it's supposed to be using a higher end processor, is probably a lot smoother. And so it's great. I'm just seeing improvements all across the board. Now, before I go down and eat with my family, which I'm really excited to do, I just wanted to show you, if I have this working properly seen, I just want to show you some of the images I've taken over the last couple of years with the GFX. I'll just make sure we still have, oh, a couple of people watching. Thank you very much. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Martin. I'm having to go back to the, I don't know if this is how this is working here. Having to go back and forth to the, I don't know, I'm using OBS. Evidently some people you can hook up like the chat and all that. I don't know how to do it. Oh, good afternoon from Jakarta. Where did that come from? Did that come from the sweet Eintje Chin. It's like zooming with a boomer. Not sure how to take that, Martin. Thank you very much. But anyway, guys, good to see you from Jakarta. Before I go, sorry, I just want to go over here to my scene thing, and I want to go to the preview app. So I have to turn off, not that, turn that off. Ah, here we are. Here's preview. So I just want to go to my preview app and just show you some images I've taken in the recent, some past. Just some of these unfortunately haven't been properly, like you can see there's a whole bunch of nastiness here. But this one I took, by the way, without using flashlights or strobes, or what do you call them, like the Godox. I was using with just those steady lights, and this JPEG looks horrible. I'm not sure why it's like that. So this is a horrible example. But the GFX, and also interesting, I was using this with a front tilted lens. So it's in focus, but it's not that sharp. So this is kind of a bad example of some of my work. But what I've loved about the GFX is the image quality is great. Is it that much better than full frame? I don't think so. But I have no faults with it. I accidentally took a JPEG in superfine. It turned out that I was able to play with the JPEG almost as much as I would play with the RAW from some cameras. But yeah, it's just it made life, especially coming from where was I? I was using A7R for a while, the first one, then and a D800. That, by the way, same sensor, the D800 looked way better. That, I don't know what it was. The RAWs from the A7R were horrible. I go back to the D800 and they look, apart from the resolution, they look almost as good as a GFX, to be very honest, in the studio with same lighting or similar lighting. Just amazing camera. But The live view was horrible. Trying to get it to focus when I was doing macro was tough, or even stuff like this. It was horrible, just to not detail. But the GFX has just been great, is what I'm trying to say. And I mean, you can go way in, and like there's just loads, gobs of detail. These are some awesome speakers. This is a Dali Zenzor S1 or Z1. But yeah, I mean, there's details just right. Even though you can, the light, how did I do this? I think I just shot through a huge reflector, and then I put a black, some sort of black, long black thing to make this line here over the top. But it just, and these are not like images that I would have, they're not edited like I would for anything, yeah, magazine fine, but not for like professional stuff. Like I wouldn't give this to a company. That would be separately edited, but it's sharp. There's just loads of detail. Color's great. I love it. This was an image I took just last year, I think. This is of a FIO BTR something. It's like a little Bluetooth device that allows you to use regular wired earphones in it. It was very easy to take. The only, whoops, sorry about that. Only problem was that it was very dark in the studio, and because of that, it was hard to focus. But this was a stacked photograph, obviously. It's sharp from here all the way till the back there. And again, the background, like it's not being professionally edited yet, but it's doing the same thing with a Hasselblad would have taken forever. And here's a new one from this is a BTR 3K. Awesome. This thing got me 100 meters from my iPhone with my favorite earphones. Freaking awesome Bluetooth device. Review forthcoming. Feel you done good. And no noise. And you can do balanced as well. And it tests as good as a high-end app. And it's like $80. Here's a great lens, by the way. Also, this again with the GFX on the Leica M10. Or taken of the Leica M10. This is a Fujifilm 35 1.7 Ultra, has not been edited, so you get like all this grain stuff in there. But there's another. It's a stacked shot, and there's just so much. I keep doing that. Sorry. How do I go back? Just so much detail in these GFX shots. Again, it's a 50 megapixel camera. Probably did it again. Sorry about that. Any 50 megapixel camera I've even seen the Canon one that people complain about the noise. That thing makes amazing images. But I mean, now the problem is, of course, once you're cleaning this up, if you're going to publish this for a like advertising, it's kind of a bugger. I would hate to do the GFX100. That's just I would not want to edit that thing. It'd be nice if some of that stuff the technology came down to a 50 megapixel GFX. It'd be really awesome. Now, if you do it in 35 millimeter mode, it looks great, and I think it basically stands toe-to-toe with like a Canon 5D Mark IV in 35 millimeter mode. Plenty of detail. This is not stacked. This is tilted, I think, if I remember correctly. But this is a Mitutoyo microscope lens. Very nice macro lens with good working distance, about like that. So you can get in real close. This is 5 times. This is a 35 millimeter mode. Really easy to shoot. This is like a $3,000 Sony headphone. Look at the detail, right in the darks, right in the blacks. I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if there's anyone commenting here over here. Let's see here. Wait, where am I? Where am I, guys? Here? Are we still showing up in that? Okay, yeah. So just look at that. The details right in the blacks, Again, a D800 probably would be able to do the same thing, but just